My dear journal, it is truly an incredible thing to think about how far one can go in his or her life. After success and failure, trials and victory, it is hard to believe just how poorly my life started out as. My first decade on this earth was spent in an abusive home, and to this day I feel as if I never truly had a childhood. But through my extended family and my love for knowledge, I was able to mature and grow enough to make my own way in the world. I remember being one of the first women in the country to run a free class in the evening for the poor in the community. Through that, I met a talented young girl I'm going to meet with today. Her name is Annika Williams, and she supported me in all the books I have written, and I remember her fondly. However, when I became sick and went to Europe, our paths parted. I saw her once more before I answered my calling to improve the lives of the mentally ill, but then we lost touch for nearly 15 years. But now I'm excited to say that we are about to meet again together. I received a letter from her near a month ago that asked to meet with me. I replied and set the dates, and she should arrive at any...
Dorothea?
She's here! Annika Williams, what a blessing from God to see you!
Oh, Dolly, I feared you might have forgotten me in all your success and travels. You become such a famous American hero, it's hard to believe I was one of your first friends.
Oh, come in and sit down, Annika, and tell me all about what you've been doing, because I guess you know all about me.
Well, as you traveled over 10 countries...
14, actually.
Truly. Well, as you traveled, I wrote. You know, I remember reading some of your first books. There was Conversation on Common Things and American Moral Tales for Young Persons were among my favorites. You know, I'll never forget how much your first pauper school changed my life, Dorothea.
How is that so?
Well, growing up was never easy for either of us. But as your father shouted about God's wrath, my father brought most of the fire and brimstone upon us with his own hands. So your evening classes not only gave me an escape and break from the tyranny, but a hope.
I remember getting so fascinated by you. You had such an excitement to learn and make your own way in the world. That is part of what got me on the road to asylum justice in the first place.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. You see, I've heard all about your success, but I want to know more than just the facts. Why on earth did you want to reform the institution for the insane?
That day happened so long ago, yet I remember it so clearly. It happened after the year I spent in Liverpool, England, with the kind Rathbones due to illness. Sailing back to America, I had this desire within my heart to take on a calling from God.
You know, I remember you mentioning that at our last meeting. It was in 1841, am I right?
Exactly, my dear friend. I was fighting for strength after the death of my grandmother, when I felt led to volunteer at the East Cambridge jail. I was supposed to simply teach a Sunday school class there to the female convicts, but it was God's plan that I would be the one to learn. I saw the mentally ill, and they were naked, beaten, starved, kept in cages like animals. Little girls wrapped in chains were at the mercy of grown, shackled men sharing the same cage as them. It was so horrid, so inexcusable, that I knew from that moment on I had to do something.
And that simple experience is what drove you to reform the institution through 20 long years?
Well, once I decided to pour myself into reforming the asylum treatment, I naturally had to see and witness more about my subject. And the more I witnessed, the more horrified I became. But with that horror came the determination I needed to make the difficult journeys through the weather and wilderness.
Staying in makeshift shelters, weathering all kinds of precipitation. No wonder you become something of an American folk hero.
But I'm only one person. And although I witnessed the atrocious crimes, I had to get the support from the people of power.
You know, that was another one of my curiosities. You see, when you went to Europe, I began to write for the newspapers. But because of my female title, no one would look at my work, let alone publish it. So I had to use a pseudonym of Edward Banks. Soon after that, the publication started going well. So how did you get your point stated for the public to hear?
Well, a pen is sharper than a sword, and words are more effective than both. I wrote to courts, to legislators, anyone who would read my writing. I disguised no truth, and I wrote to get their attention. There was no euphemism in my writing. In one of my letters, I implored them to rise up the fallen, succor the desolate, restore the outcast, and defend the helpless, and for their eternal and great reward, receive the benediction.
Such strong and powerful words.
Well, I felt that if I was able to inflict an emotion upon them and move them to horror, it would acquaint them with the power, with the power which they had to alleviate the ones who were in pain. And I also wanted no wasted time, so they had to be implored enough to hasten to the victims of legalized barbarity.
Although America's land is won by swords and battles, freedom will only be pursued by the poetic writers of our time.
I couldn't have put it better. In order to succeed, I traveled to hundreds of towns, passed through many countries, joined conventions, and used those more powerful than I to prove my point. But even with that, it took nearly 2 decades to begin to make a notable change.
And through all this, you became an American symbol of heroic reformation. What success did you have?
I am so pleased with the amount of money I was able to raise for the poor, abused, mentally ill. There are now over 32 hospitals built properly for them.
I heard you raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and traveled over 10,000 miles. Oh, and didn't you publish an amazing letter to the legislator in 1843 that changed the asylum reform forever?
I published my special memorial in January 1843. It included my findings in towns such as Lincoln, Lenox, Brookfield, Denham, and Claremont, just to name a few. I used actual examples of the prisoners kept there to get their attention. Things were just so bad that I had to continue to persevere until things started to change.
Dorothea, you are a woman of our time. Not only did you show them what needed to be changed, but you started something that will never be forgotten. You're a woman of history, Dorothea.
And even as the Civil War looms ahead, I feel content in my heart to know what I've done for God and for the innocent.
It's been so good meeting with you, Dorothea. We must plan to meet again.
That we must, Annika. Goodbye, and may God bless you.
You are a hero, Dorothea Dix, and may your work never be forgotten.